A young mother stepped out into the darkness for what was supposed to be a routine morning run. She followed the same streets she had traveled countless times before, but this time, she would never make it home. The disappearance set off an urgent search, and within hours, investigators began uncovering disturbing clues that suggested something far more sinister than anyone had initially feared. What started as a local missing person case quickly escalated into a national story, one that would expose a chain of failures no one could ignore. Eliza Fletcher was born on November 9, 1987, in Memphis, Tennessee. She grew up in a family that was deeply rooted in the community. Her grandfather had built a private hardware supply company valued at over $3 billion, but the family's reputation extended beyond wealth. They were known for their philanthropy and long-standing support of local charities. Despite expectations that she would eventually take on a role in the family business, Eliza chose a very different path. Teaching was where she felt she belonged. She attended a private high school, went on to study at the University of Memphis, and later earned a master's degree in education. Eliza was not only academically driven, she was also highly athletic. She played soccer at the university level, enjoyed long-distance running, and frequently participated in marathons. Fitness was a constant in her life, something she made time for no matter how busy her schedule became. After completing her education, Eliza accepted a position as a preschool teacher. From the beginning, it was clear she had found her purpose. She connected naturally with her students, and parents quickly recognized how deeply she cared about the children in her classroom. Outside of work, Eliza was active in her church community. It was there that she met Richard. Their relationship grew steadily, eventually leading to marriage. Together, they welcomed 2 sons and built what appeared to be a quiet, happy life. Family time mattered deeply to Eliza. She and Richard loved spending time outdoors, camping, hiking, and taking road trips whenever they could. Even with 2 young children and a demanding job, Eliza never gave up her daily runs. By 2022, at the age of 34, Eliza was training for the Boston Marathon. Her preparation required longer and more frequent runs, so she adjusted her schedule. To balance training with family life, she began running before sunrise, often leaving the house around 4 a.m., so she could return in time to have breakfast with her family and head to work. On the morning of September 2nd, Eliza followed that same routine. She slipped out before dawn for her usual run near the University of Memphis. It was a route she knew well, one she had completed safely many times before. But that morning, something went terribly wrong. Eliza's regular route covered just over 4 miles and usually took her about an hour to complete. By the time Richard woke up that morning, she should have already been back home. But the house was still quiet. At first, he assumed she had simply taken longer than usual. But as the minutes passed, concern began to set in. He sent her a text message. There was no reply. He tried calling her phone. Once, then again. Each call went unanswered. This was completely out of character for Eliza. She was scheduled to work an early shift that day, and punctuality was something she never took lightly. By around 7 a.m., Richard knew something was wrong. He contacted the police and reported his wife missing. Officers responded quickly. Based on what Richard told them, it didn't appear that Eliza had chosen to leave voluntarily. She had taken only her phone and a water bottle, nothing that suggested she planned to go anywhere beyond her run. There were no notes, no messages, no indication of distress beforehand. Because Eliza often ran through the University of Memphis campus, police immediately notified university administrators and asked that students and staff remain alert. Patrols were increased, and officers began canvassing the surrounding area. Word of Eliza's disappearance spread rapidly. Her family's prominence in Memphis meant the case quickly gained media attention. Local news stations interrupted regular programming, and within hours, her face was everywhere. As with many cases involving a missing spouse, public suspicion quickly turned toward Richard. Viewers dissected his interviews, analyzing his tone, his expressions, and his words. but investigators found no evidence pointing in his direction. All available information confirmed that he had been home when Eliza left for her run. While rumors circulated online, detectives focused on tangible evidence. Surveillance footage became their top priority. Cameras along Eliza's usual route were reviewed frame by frame. Initially, nothing seemed unusual. Eliza appeared on camera jogging at her normal pace, focused and steady. She looked exactly as she always did during her early morning runs. Then investigators reached footage from a camera positioned just beyond the edge of campus. At approximately 4:20 a.m., Eliza ran past a dark-colored SUV parked along the road. Seconds later, a man exited the vehicle and sprinted toward her. The footage showed a brief struggle before he forced her into the SUV. The vehicle remained parked for several minutes. Then it drove away, with Eliza inside. In that moment, the investigation transformed. This was no longer a missing person case. It was a kidnapping, and time was now the most critical factor. With confirmation that Eliza had been abducted, investigators immediately escalated the case. Additional law enforcement agencies were brought in, and the priority was clear: locate Eliza as quickly as possible and bring her home alive. The surveillance footage provided crucial insight, but it also came with limitations. The video was grainy, and while the suspect's actions were unmistakable, his face was difficult to identify. The license plate on the SUV was also too blurred to read. Still, detectives noticed important details. By reviewing footage from other cameras in the area, they discovered that the same SUV had driven past Eliza several minutes before the abduction. Even more concerning, the vehicle had been circling near the university roughly 20 minutes earlier. It appeared the driver had been searching deliberately. After spotting Eliza, the suspect parked ahead on her route and waited. The ambush was not random. It was planned. Police released images of the SUV to the public, asking anyone with information to come forward. Investigators were able to identify the vehicle's make and model and noted a distinctive feature. One of the tail lights was broken. Despite this, tracking down the vehicle proved difficult. Memphis is a large city, and many similar SUVs were registered in the area. As officers continued searching, a new lead emerged. Later that same morning, a passerby found a cell phone and a water bottle discarded along a roadside roughly 7 miles from where Eliza had been taken. The items were turned over to police. It took time to confirm their significance, but with help from Eliza's family, detectives verified that both belonged to her. Investigators believed the kidnapper had thrown them out of the moving vehicle in an attempt to destroy evidence or prevent tracking. But there was something else. Next to the phone and water bottle lay a pair of men's flip-flops. The discovery immediately raised questions. Why would a suspect discard his own shoes? One theory suggested they may have been contaminated with blood or other evidence. Another possibility was even more telling. If the suspect had been wearing them barefoot, the sandals could contain his DNA. The flip-flops were rushed to a forensic laboratory while officers expanded their search along nearby roads and properties. The location where the items were found helped investigators narrow down the suspect's likely route, but for the moment, there were still no answers about Eliza's condition. Hours passed with no sign of her. As daylight faded, the urgency grew. Detectives clung to the hope that she was still alive, but with each passing hour, that hope became more fragile. Then the lab called. Forensic analysts had successfully extracted a DNA profile from the flip-flops. When the sample was entered into the national database, it produced a match. The DNA belonged to a 38-year-old man named Cleotha Abston. At last, investigators had a name, and now the race to find him began. Once Cleotha Abston was identified, investigators moved quickly. His criminal history immediately raised alarms. The fact that his DNA was already in the system suggested a long record of prior offenses, and detectives now believed they were dealing with an extremely dangerous individual. The following day, Saturday, officers located Cleotha driving in Memphis. When they attempted to stop him, he fled. A brief pursuit followed before he abandoned the vehicle and ran into an apartment complex where his brother lived. Police surrounded the building and took Kleotha into custody without further incident. He was transported to the station for questioning. From the start, Kleotha denied everything. He claimed he had no involvement in Eliza's disappearance and said he had no idea why police were targeting him. He remained calm, almost detached as detectives pressed him for answers. While Kleotha sat in an interrogation room, officers spoke with his brother. What they learned immediately deepened their suspicions. According to the brother, Kleotha had shown up at his apartment early on the morning of the abduction. He arrived in a hurry, dumped a pile of clothes into the washing machine, and began aggressively cleaning his SUV, scrubbing it as if he were trying to erase something important. Detectives quickly obtained search warrants for both the apartment and Kleotha's vehicle. Inside the apartment, officers found no direct evidence connected to Eliza. However, they did uncover illegal drugs and weapons, which resulted in Kleotha's brother being arrested on separate charges. The vehicle told a different story. Forensic technicians discovered traces of blood inside Kleotha's SUV. Laboratory testing later confirmed what investigators feared. The blood belonged to Eliza Fletcher. Despite the mounting evidence, Kleotha continued to deny any involvement. He offered no explanation for the blood, the surveillance footage, or the discarded flip-flops. He refused to say where Eliza was or what had happened to her. By this point, investigators were preparing for the worst. Search teams expanded their efforts, focusing on areas near where Eliza's phone and water bottle had been recovered. Fields, wooded areas, and abandoned properties were methodically searched. The operation continued into Monday evening. Then, a call came in over the radio. One of the search teams had discovered a woman's body in tall grass on an abandoned property, just a few hundred yards from where Eliza's belongings had been found. Officers at the scene were nearly certain it was her, but official confirmation would have to wait. The confirmation came the next day. The body discovered in the tall grass belonged to Eliza Fletcher. The medical examiner documented multiple scrapes and abrasions across her body, evidence of a violent struggle. The cause of death was determined to be a single gunshot wound to the head. When investigators found her, Eliza's running shorts were missing. They were later recovered from a nearby trash bin, but authorities never publicly confirmed whether a sexual assault had occurred. Kleotha Abston continued to deny everything. Despite his repeated denials, the physical evidence left little room for doubt. He was formally charged with first-degree murder, and news of Eliza's death sent a wave of grief through Memphis. Vigils appeared across the city, but sorrow quickly gave way to anger as more information surfaced. As reporters dug deeper, Kleotha's past came into focus, and it was deeply disturbing. His first encounter with law enforcement happened when he was just 11 years old. Over the next several years, he was arrested repeatedly for crimes that escalated in severity: robbery, assault, illegal gun possession, and gang-related activity. By the age of 16, he had already been arrested more than a dozen times. That same year, he was charged with sexually assaulting a man. After serving 6 months in juvenile detention, he was released into his mother's custody. Only 2 weeks later, he committed another violent crime. Kleotha kidnapped a well-known attorney at gunpoint, forced him into a vehicle, and drove him around the city demanding access to an ATM. When the victim attempted to get help, police intervened, and Kleotha was arrested. Tried as an adult, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. He served 20 years before being released early in November 2020. Had that sentence been carried out in full, Eliza Fletcher would never have crossed his path. As outrage grew, a woman named Alicia stepped forward with a story that shocked the public. She explained that in the summer of 2021, she met Kleotha through a dating app. After weeks of messaging, he asked her to meet him late one night and gave her an address. When she arrived, she realized the building was abandoned. It was the same property where Eliza's body would later be found. Once inside, Kleotha pulled a gun. forced Alicia back into her car, and assaulted her. Alicia was 4 months pregnant at the time and told him, hoping it would make him stop. It didn't. Afterward, she drove herself to the hospital and reported the assault to police. DNA was collected. She provided his name, photographs, phone number, and dating profile. And yet, Cleotha was never arrested. The question that haunted the public was simple. How could someone with such a history still be free? In Alicia's case, investigators had everything they needed: DNA evidence, identification, and a detailed report. But the case was never completed. The paperwork was not filed in time, and the DNA sample was not entered into the national database until after Eliza Fletcher had been murdered. When outrage erupted, the police department cited staffing shortages as the reason for the delay. For many, the explanation offered little comfort. To the public, it appeared the system had failed twice, first by releasing Cleotha Abston years early, and then by allowing a violent offender to remain free despite clear warning signs. Alicia had even attempted to seek accountability through legal action, filing a lawsuit against the city. The case was dismissed. Only after Eliza's death did prosecutors finally move forward with charges related to Alicia's assault. Cleotha, meanwhile, maintained his innocence. His family stood by him, publicly expressing their belief that he was incapable of such crimes. His mother described him as kind and insisted she trusted her son's word. But the evidence told a different story. Just one day before Eliza was abducted, Cleotha had been working a shift for a cleaning service at a movie theater. That evening, a coworker discovered that 2 of her credit cards were missing. Surveillance footage later showed Cleotha taking them. In the footage, he was wearing the same flip-flops later found near Eliza's phone and water bottle. Those theft charges were added only after Eliza's murder. Cleotha was first tried for the assault on Alicia. In May 2024, he was sentenced to 80 years in prison. Attention then turned to Eliza's case. Prosecutors initially sought the death penalty, but a plea deal was eventually offered.